Companies wanting to supercharge their Salesforce implementation look to integrate data from third-party systems like QuickBooks. In the past, this has been cumbersome and expensive, in part because every company's Salesforce has a slightly different configuration, and in part because most third-party packages put you in a box and are not easily configurable. With QIME, QuickBooks Integrations Made Easy, seamless QuickBooks integrations have arrived into the Salesforce ecosystem. QIME is the culmination of 5 years of custom QuickBooks integrations, distilled into a free, open source package that is usable for the Salesforce community. QIME allows businesses to sync invoices, customers, and payments between the two systems. In this video, we cover how QIME can help integrate data between QuickBooks and Salesforce. My name is Justin, and I help businesses get the most out of their Salesforce implementation through building software to integrate and automate business process. If you are in need of a Salesforce consultant, check the links in the description to get in touch. With that, let's jump into the package. What is QIME, or QuickBooks Integrations Made Easy? Like I said, QIME is an open source package that you can use to go and integrate data between Salesforce and QuickBooks. Some of the features include creating customers in QuickBooks from accounts in Salesforce, creating invoices in Salesforce and syncing them to QuickBooks Online, syncing invoices from QuickBooks to Salesforce, syncing payments, as well as syncing invoice terms. In terms of what is required to get QIME configured, you're going to need admin access to the following systems: Salesforce and QuickBooks. The most common use case that I see people integrating from QuickBooks to Salesforce or vice versa is that they'll have an opportunity inside of Salesforce and they want to immediately turn that into an invoice. Whether that invoice gets sent out automatically or waits to get sent out is up in the air, but due to business process. But most companies, especially if they have complex quotes, they'll want to go and turn their opportunities into invoices. With QIME, this is straightforward. I have here a sample opportunity. We can see a few products here as well. We'll go ahead and create the invoice. This will go and create an invoice object that is ready to sync. We'll go ahead and create the invoice with QuickBooks, which will go ahead and create this invoice 1044. If we go inside of QuickBooks, we can search for this exact invoice. And you can see we have an invoice connected to a customer with products, with quantity, etc. attached. This functionality that businesses look for when they're syncing between QuickBooks and Salesforce is so common that this is the backbone of the QIME package, which is why it's first and foremost at the center. Now that the demos are out of the way, let's go and jump into configuring and showing how you can go and install this. First and foremost, we'll need to go and install the package. I recommend going to the GitHub link in the description below to get the latest package URLs, as this will be the most frequently maintained. I'm going to be installing this inside a Trailhead, so I'll be using the production URL. If you're interested, there's also a sandbox URL. Now that we are on the install screen, I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge and install. Keep in mind that QIME is in the process of being approved by the appexchange, and I will be following up on that when this is approved. There's two main parts to getting the authentication working within the QIME package. We'll need to ensure that the QuickBooks authentication is set up, and we'll need to configure a few things within Salesforce. So the first thing that we can do is go to the Intuit developer portal, and we'll need to go and get a developer account. This does not need to be the same email or account as your QuickBooks account that you'll use to sign in. I'm going to go ahead and sign up and create a new account. Now that we have our account, there's a few important things that we'll need to do. First, we'll want to go to the dashboard. This will allow us to create an app. This app will allow us to go and authenticate within Salesforce. We'll want to go ahead and give it a name. I'm going to call this QIME, and we'll need a scope. I'm going to give the scope of com.intuit.quickbooks.accounting. With that, we have everything we need to get started. You can see here on the left-hand side, we have two sections. We have a development section and a production setting. These are for connecting to either sandbox companies or production companies. You'll see here, if you want to connect to a production company, that you'll need to go and fill out a few additional things. These are pretty self-explanatory and will take about 30 minutes to fill out. But once that's done, you can go and have access to production settings. There's 3 or 4 important things that we'll need to do in here. We'll need the client ID, we'll need the client secret, we'll need to add a redirect URI, and we'll also need to get the realm ID or the company ID of our QuickBooks company. To get the company ID, what we'll do is we'll go to API Docs and Tools. We'll go to API Explorer. And if we look at any sample company, any sample request, you can see that we have this long number in pink. This number in pink is going to be the realm ID for your company or your company ID. With that, let's jump into Salesforce and talk about how to go and get the configuration up and running. Now that the package installation is complete, we're going to go and set up the authentication from the Salesforce side. Inside of Setup, we're going to go to Auth Providers. And we're going to create a new record. We're going to give the provider type is going to be QB Auth Provider. This is the auth provider that was created within the QIME package. And we'll go ahead and configure this based on a few things. The name will be QB Auth Provider. The URL suffix will follow as well. And then the first thing that we'll want to do is we'll want to make sure that this is in a savable state. So we'll fill out the execute registration as an admin user. I happen to be the only admin user. And we'll save this. Now that this is complete, we'll want to go and edit this with a few details so that then we can complete this. We'll want the auth URL as follows. We'll want the client ID as the client ID within the app. We'll want the client secret as the client secret within the QuickBooks app. We'll want the minor version as the latest minor version within QuickBooks. At the time of recording, this happens to be 65. We'll want the realm ID to be the realm ID of the company, or the company ID. So we'll go to API Docs, we'll go to the API Explorer, we'll grab the company ID down here. For the scope, we'll want this to be the same as the scope that we configured in the app. So this happens to be this com.intuit.quickbooks.accounting. For the token URL, we'll want to go and use the following. And we'll go ahead and save this. And the last thing that we'll want to do is we'll want to add the callback URL. Each instance of Salesforce will have its own unique callback URL as it's tied to the My Domain function of your Salesforce instance. To get the callback URL, you can see here we have the callback URL under the Salesforce configuration settings. So we'll go ahead and copy that and put this here. Additionally, we'll need to go and add this as a redirect URI inside of the QuickBooks app. So we'll go ahead and go to the QuickBooks app. Inside of keys and credentials, we'll add a URI, and we'll go ahead and add this URI and save. With that, all of the initial configuration should be complete. We can go and test that the configuration is working correctly by opening this test only initialization URL. If we go to here, we sign in with QuickBooks, we will get some sort of XML file. It's not important to see this information, but it's important to see that this is the end file. If you had any errors from either Salesforce or QuickBooks, those would appear in this step, which means that the configuration is not set up correctly. So please go back and look through that before continuing. With that, it's time to discuss how we're going to go and actually let the code execute on the authentication. We're going to use that with a component called named credentials. Now, named credentials recently got overhauled in the Winter 23 release, which allows them to be a little bit more customizable and a little bit more streamlined. So I'm going to walk you through not only how to set up a named credential, but also how to use the new named credentials that have been released. So we're going to go to the named credentials section, and there's two things we can do. We can create a named credential, external credential, and a little bonus for you as a new legacy. First, to use the new named credential system, we're going to go to external credentials, and we're going to create a new record. We're going to call this QB external credential. The name is going to be QB external credential with no spaces. And the authentication protocol is going to be OAuth 2.0. The authentication flow type is going to be browser flow. The scope is not required. And the authentication provider is going to be this QB auth provider. Next, we'll want to go and allow users to use the external credential. We can do that through permission set mappings. The way that I'm going to configure this is it's going to be for the entire organization. Now, you can get to more granular permission sets using this permission set mapping. With that, for the permission set, we're going to use this QBO user, which is part of the QIME package. We want the sequence number to be 1 and the identity type to be a named principal. Now that this is created, we're going to go ahead and create the named credential, which is the middleware that allows the Apex code to go and communicate between the credentials that's saved within Salesforce and QuickBooks. I'm going to go ahead and go to named credentials. We're going to go to named credentials, and we're going to create a new named credential. We're going to go ahead and have the label as QB named credential, the name as QB named credential without spaces, and we're going to have the URL is the URL based on the QuickBooks environment that you'll be connected to. For my case, I'm connecting to a sandbox, so I'm going to use the sandbox URL. If you are not connecting to a sandbox URL, it would look something like this. Again, please follow through the guide linked in the description to get all of the values. Next, we'll want to have an external credential, which is the external credential we just created in the previous step. We'll want to go ahead and uncheck this generate authorization header. We'll want to allow formulas in the HTTP header, and we'll want to allow the namespace of QIME. With that, the named credential is complete, and it's time to go and start syncing data between the two systems. One thing to note before we start running into syncing is there's two kind of critical things to note about the named credential approach. First and foremost is that only one company can be connected to a QuickBooks account at a time. This means that the first company that you are logged into through the admin account will be the account that you are required to use. This means that if they have a sandbox account, the sandbox account will be the first account that's used. Additionally, the other thing to note is that the refresh token, which is the OAuth 2 procedure of how we are authenticating between the two systems, expires every hour. So what this means in principle is that code needs to be running hourly or more frequently to go and ensure that the refresh token does not expire. Now, if you happen to go and have a refresh token expire, no problem. We can go and refresh that quite easily by going through the same process that you used to log in. Speaking of which, to log in and start the authentication process, you'll go to the QuickBooks external credential. You'll click on a given permission set mapping. You can see here in actions we have a down arrow, and you can see this authentication status is not configured. We'll go ahead and press authenticate, which will take us through the QuickBooks login OAuth flow, and we'll be authenticated if everything is set up correctly. With that, let's jump into how to sync customers. When we're creating customers in QuickBooks, it's important to note that all accounting entities like invoices, payments, even sales receipts, etc., are all related to the customer. And so it is important that we have some sort of data parity within Salesforce. I have right here the accounts, and we use accounts inside of QIME to represent a customer inside of QuickBooks. What I'll show you today is how we can create new customers from accounts inside of Salesforce. With that, it's very simple to go and configure. We have an action here, so where everything else is here, we have an action to go and sync customers. And to add this, we'll go to Setup. We'll go to the Object Manager, Accounts. We'll go to Buttons, Links, and Actions. And we can see already here this sync with QuickBooks. So all we need to do is add it to the page layout. So we'll go to the account layout. We'll go to mobile and lightning actions. We'll also go in, because this page layout hasn't been edited, we'll need to click this wrench here. And we'll go ahead and bring this sync with QuickBooks down to the page layout. We'll go ahead and save, and we'll go back to the account. Now that we're at the account page, it's time to go ahead and sync this record. If we go to the action bar, click Sync with QuickBooks, we can run the sync, and we'll be greeted with the same page. Now if we go inside of QuickBooks, go to Customers, we can see this new account / customer synced. We can see all of the address, phone, billing, shipping, etc. already here. The other important thing is syncing existing customers within Salesforce/QuickBooks to each other. Now, this is a very tedious process, generally because the customer, phone, email, all will have like pretty bad data if it's not linked. So oftentimes this is going to be a very manual process. Inside of Salesforce, we have a field on the account called QuickBooks ID, which stores the ID for a given account. It's not currently on the page layout, but you could add this to the page layout. And what you'll want to do is for your merge, you have a export of all of your Salesforce accounts. You have an export of all of your QuickBooks accounts. You merge based on name, email, phone number, etc. And then upload that ID back to Salesforce. This is obviously a very tedious process, and additionally, it's very difficult to automate, which is why I don't have anything included in this package as of the time of recording. So if this is something that you're interested in, links down below for a free quote. The next thing to discuss is syncing invoices between Salesforce and QuickBooks. Now, there's two setups that I'll be discussing, like I went over in the intro. This is the creating invoices from opportunities, and as well as just a service line item and syncing from QuickBooks to Salesforce. What we'll do first is we'll go ahead and go over how to export your products. I have a good video up in the card below that talks about how to go and export your products from QuickBooks. From there, you'll want to go and link your SKUs to the QuickBooks ID. So if we go to Setup and the Product object, then we can see the QuickBooks ID that we'll want to populate within the given product record. Down the road, this process will be simplified, but I wanted to get this in as many hands as quickly as possible, and so that's why we're at this state we are now. So the first thing that I want to go over is how to go and sync invoices with only a service line item. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Setup, and we will see inside custom metadata, we'll see a metadata type called QIME config. And from here we can go and edit the default record and fill in any related information that needs to be done. So what we'll be doing is we'll be using the use line item, and we'll be grabbing the QuickBooks product ID. So how do we grab the QuickBooks product ID? If we go into QuickBooks, we can go to Settings, Products and Services. We can click on a product and run the report. And we'll go ahead and press back, and we'll copy this URL. From here, this URL is very jumbled, so I'm going to go and paste this into a text editor. And we can see inside this, we can see something called item. It's very small here, so apologize. But this item happens to be 3. So that is the service, that is the product ID for this service or product concrete. So I'm going to go ahead and quit. And I'm going to go ahead and just enter 3 here. One last thing that we'll want to do before we go ahead and start creating our first invoice is we'll want to go ahead and sync our invoice terms. So there's two places that the invoice terms are stored. There's a custom setting, which will go and update via Apex code. And you can see here that we don't have any QuickBooks terms right now. Additionally, if we go to the invoice, you can see on the field and relationships, there is a terms field. And from here, we can go and add new terms. I already have the 2-3 most common ones that are used, but feel free to add more. So for instance, if you wanted a net 60, you could add that here. Additionally, any other custom terms that you have, you can add here. Do note that this is case sensitive. The next thing that we'll want to do is we'll want to go ahead and run the code snippet to sync. So if we go to the developer console, open the execute anonymous by pressing Control E, and we can run the following code snippet here, and we can press execute. If you want to see all of the Apex code snippets and more, check the article in the link down below. From here, you can see all of the terms synced. So if we go back to the custom setting, if we go to QuickBooks Terms, plural, manage, we can see all of the terms that are inside the QuickBooks org. It's up to your specific Salesforce org and team to decide which terms you want to expose. And you can see IDs related to every term. With that, it's time to go ahead and map invoices. So first thing that we'll want to do is we'll want to go ahead and look at how the mapping is done. You can see that here. Next, we'll want to go ahead and add the Create Invoices button to the page layout. So if we go to Opportunity, Page Layouts, your opportunity layout that you're working with, Mobile Actions, and add Create Invoice to the page layout, then we can go ahead and create a page layout. The other thing that we'll want to do is we'll want to add the action to the invoice page layout. If we go to the Object Manager, Invoice, Page Layouts, Invoice Layout, we can see that there are two actions. One of them is Sync with QuickBooks, one of them is Create Invoice with QuickBooks. These are for the two modalities of QIME. Create Invoice is for when you want to push from Salesforce to QuickBooks. Sync from QuickBooks is when you want to go from QuickBooks to Salesforce. I'm going to go ahead and add the Create Invoice with QuickBooks and save the page layout. From here, it's time to go and sync an invoice from Salesforce into QuickBooks. We can do that by going to a given opportunity that we want to sync. We can create an invoice with this button here, Create Invoice. This will go and create a related record with the given details. And we'll go ahead and create invoice with QuickBooks. What you'll see is that the invoice is updated with an invoice name, QuickBooks ID, and a few other details. Additionally, if we look for the invoice 1041 in QuickBooks, we can see this invoice here related to the customer, etc. Now, most people who are going to be integrating QuickBooks and Salesforce are not going to be starting with a fresh instance of QuickBooks. That means that they're going to have past data from QuickBooks that they'll want to sync and bring over to Salesforce. There's a very easy way of doing this. what we can do is open the developer console. We can go and open the Execute Anonymous window by pressing Control E. And we can run the following code snippet here. We're going to use a queuable to go and bring all of the invoices from QuickBooks to Salesforce. Additionally, if you want to go and sync invoices every hour, every 30 minutes, every day, etc., we can do that using the scheduler. What we can do is again open the Execute Anonymous. We can use the following code snippet here. This will go and sync at all invoices, all recently created invoices at the top of every hour. If you're familiar with cron expressions, you can go and change this to be 30 minutes at the bottom of the hour. You can change it to be 5th minute of every hour. You can change this to be daily, etc. So the last thing that I want to discuss is how to go and bring payments over. Payments are a little bit tricky within QuickBooks, but it is still a manageable thing. This is because of two main factors. Number one, when you go and request from the invoice, you only get the related transaction. You don't actually get the full payment details. Thing number two is that an invoice can be related to multiple payments, and payments can be related to multiple invoices. Thus, we get in a problem where we need to have a junction object to go and facilitate this. Nevertheless, QIME handles all of this quite well. You can see here we have an invoice. And if we go, we can see this junction object called invoice payments. And we can see the related invoice as well as the related payment. And we can see the payment amount. If you want to see how payments are mapped from QuickBooks to Salesforce, you can see the mapping chart here. If you want to go and sync payments, you can go and do the following. Go ahead and open up Developer Console. I'm going to go ahead and Execute Anonymous. And if we want to go and sync all existing payments, we can use this payment queuable, similar to how the invoice queuable is set up. If we want to go ahead and schedule payments to be brought over every hour, what we can do is run the following code snippet. This code snippet will, just like the invoice, sync payments at the top of every hour. I highly recommend you go and enable this after setting this up. With that, that's going to conclude our overview of how to use the QIME package. If you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and leave a comment and like for the YouTube algorithm, as it helps me go and make more YouTube videos. With that, thanks and have a great day.